everyone, and welcome to Leveling Up. Today, I'm very lucky to have Her Excellency Kinehild, the library from Awertha, from the West Kingdom, to teach us how to sign our name in a period fashion, which is something that's actually really close and near and dear to my heart because I think people want to be able to do that, but they don't really know where to start. So I'm really, really happy that you offered to do this, and I really appreciate it. And I'm just gonna let you go for it. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. I am. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm really excited to get to teach this. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've been on Zoom so much you would think this would all be natural, and yet. All right, so we can all see this, yes?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, present.
There we go. Medieval signatures.
All right, let's try it that way. Present. Okay, so yes, I'm going to be talking about medieval signatures. We're going to talk about different options you have if calligraphy is a scary thing. So I'm a scribe and a little bit of an illuminator. I can't draw people to save my life, so I mostly stick to the scribal stuff. But I recognize that calligraphy can be a little scary. So what I'm going to do is talk about some things, some options that you have that aren't calligraphy based. And then we're going to talk about some calligraphy options and why the easy way is actually more historically accurate. So hopefully we'll all have a little bit of fun. This should take about 30 minutes, give or take. And I should pull up the Facebook thing. So if you guys have questions, you can drop it in the Facebook stream and I can answer them. So let's start with who I am. As Sir Rauken mentioned, my name is Dam Kinehild, the library. I am up here in the Principality of Awertha, which is the beautiful state of Alaska. So that means the sun is going down at about 11 o'clock right now, which is real rough in my life. I love words. I love writing. I have my laurel for research and Dead Germanic languages. So anytime that I can talk about words and other stuff like that, I am 100% here to do it. I also like dogs. And there's some more stuff about me on there. If you have any questions, anything like that, please feel free to shoot me an email, Kinehild, Cynehild at westkingdom.org. I knew that. Okay, so basic
you look
stuff.
like you have a great sense of humor too. Like,
oh,
yeah.
So, well, thank you.
Anyway,
I think, you know, I have had good teachers who are, I've had teachers who are funny and teachers who aren't, and I always remember the funny ones better. Like if I can laugh about it, then it's going to stick in my head a little better. So that's the goal. So what are the basics? What are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about how to apply your name or your sign to a document. In period, this was done to signify approval or any other sort of like of accompanying material. So if you're going to have a contract, I started out, like I mentioned, Dead Germanic languages are my jam. So Old English charters are there's a lot of them, and they all have at the bottom the names of the people who witnessed the charter. And these aren't necessarily signatures. It's really just like I name subscriptcy, which means I put my name below this. And it would usually be written by the scribe, but it's that sort of, here's my name, and I'm putting it below this document to signify my support or approval of it. A signature here can, in the Middle Ages, can be either an abstract kind of design, that's what we're going to start on first, something called the Signum manus, which literally means hand sign, or a more direct representation of the signer's name, which is like a modern signature where you sign your name. So let's start with the Signum manus. If your handwriting is not great, or calligraphy is a thing that you're just looking at and you're like, you know what, guys, I don't want any part of this. It's cool. And if you're nervous about messing up a scribe's work by sort of not quite signing your name on the bottom, the Signum manus may be the way for you to go. It is a really cool kind of geometric design. So rather than writing your name out in the way that it would appear in a paragraph of text, so like if I was going to do my name, Kinehild, what you're going to do is you end up drawing this sort of symbol that contains all the characters of your name. It's a very sort of geometric design, and you do it the same way over and over and over again. This was used by royalty in the Frankish territories, the Holy Roman Empire, and to a lesser extent in Anglo-Saxon England. And the Holy Roman Empire actually kept it around until about the 15th century. It really fell out of favor because they ended up using wax seals and other large documents or document seals, sometimes like metal ones, right? But there is, I do have an example on the next page from the 15th century, which was kind of cool to find. We have two sort of distinct styles. We have the H or box type, which when we look at the next page will be pretty self-explanatory, or the cruciform type. Cruciform here means cross-shaped. The earliest surviving examples are Merovingian. So those are a group of Franks. They're royal charters dating to about the 7th century. They have the box monogram, so that's Clothar and Clovis. Later in the 7th century, we switch away from monograms and go to wax seals. And then we kind of bounce back to monograms again, 7th and 8th century, as well as using them in Gaul, which is France, and Anglo-Saxon England. So let's look at what a signum manus is. So this is what it is. And if you've ever seen a scroll signed by His Grace Fabian out of the West, Fabian uses a signum manus. This is a really neat and very underused way to write your name in the Middle Ages in the SCA. So if you are entering tournaments that you want to become a prince or princess or a king or queen, this is a really cool style to learn. This is very royal, has lots of excellent historical precedents, and does not require you to be a particularly skillful calligrapher, which is dandy. So the first example we have here is Otto, and you're probably, this is the H type or the box type. Like I mentioned, it's kind of obvious how it got its name. It's a box shape, right? Or you could describe it as an H. So we can see here, you cannot see my hand as I point to the screen.
We can see your mouse though, if you use
Oh, good.
mouse.
Okay. So you can see, let's see, use annotate. Let's find out. That's a terrible idea, but we will try it anyway, drawing it. So there's one of the O's. There's the other O. And then you have a T here and a T here. So O-T-T-O, right?
Yeah, very
so that's probably the easiest one. The next one there is Charlemagne, remembering that Charlemagne's name in Latin is Carolus. So we have a K at the beginning. The A is kind of hidden in this centerpiece here. That's that little dip there. R, and then the center bit is also an O, L, and then you could describe this as a U, this bottom bit here, and then S. So you've got all the bits, and this is the cruciform type. So you can see here the letters make the shape of a cross.
very
The next one, and this is 782, looking at the next one, that's Arnulf. It gets a little easier to spot, and Arnulfus would be his Latin name, remembering that they're writing their names in Latin here. So you have the A at the top of that central, you have A here. There's the R is pretty obvious up top. There's your N is hanging out for reasons known only to Arnulfus on the side. U, there's an F, here's the L, and then back to the U, and there's your S. So the letters are all kind of hidden around. And sometimes it's a little bit of a game to find, like spot the letter. The bottom two are where things really start to come off the rails. So Henry, Henricius would be his name in Latin, I believe. And then Frederick, I think he's also adding, there might be an Ave in there for Ave Maria, because obviously there's no A in Frederick, even if you spell it in Latin. So I'm guessing that's kind of what's happening there. But that's that 15th century example down at the bottom.
So the little like squiggle by the F and Arnulf, is that just like stylistic or?
Yeah, so that's a serif.
Okay.
So when you think about serif versus non-serif fonts, he's using a serifed font. And so the F in the serifed font would have the little bar at the end.
So I'm going to be a total dork and say
yeah.
This is like the Deathly Hallows in Harry Potter, right? Like the cape and the wand and the stone. Anyway.
So as a kid, let me see if I can do this in a way that's going to make sense. So my given name is Claire Knutson Lada. So I used to do This is not, I'm not good at drawing with a.
Nobody is.
So that's how I used to sign things.
Very
So you
cool.
had the C and then a K backwards, and then the L is kind of backwards. So I didn't realize it. Obviously, you know, like I'm 10 when I'm like, I've invented the coolest way to sign your name. I'm really just kind of copying these earlier Signum manus, though I'm not putting all the letters of my name in there. If I wanted to do it today in the SCA, Kinehild or Kinehilda, I guess if you want to go make it sound kind of Latin, does get a little tricky because there's no good sort of round letters that I can use to build around it. But I could probably go with one of these H-shaped ones or box-shaped ones and make it work. I am not going to try and do it on the fly. If I was clever, I would have tried to do it ahead of time.
It's cool.
But
I love this as an option though, because
yeah,
it's not intimidating at all, and it's very creative.
It's creative and it's unique. So when your signature, like I always, when I see something that Duke Fabian has signed, it's incredibly, without even knowing, like finding the letters, I know whose signature that is, because it is so unique to his style in the SCA that you're just like, there you go. I know who that is. So this is one of the sort of non-obvious versions of a signature that we're going to talk about. So let's move on. The next one, these are much more complicated, and unfortunately the pictures are not super clear because I'm pulling them from a website that I've mentioned there, Litera Visigothica. These are Visigothic monogrammatic signs from Spain, 10th, 12th century. These, I only learned about these in the last year, and I am obsessed with them. I have become completely obsessed. The Visigoths are a Germanic people. They come out of Scandinavia-ish. They come down, they run into the Huns, there's some problems there. They split up a bit. Some of them end up in Italy, those are Ostrogoths. Some of them end up in Spain, those are Visigoths. And then there's a lot of cross-pollination between the two groups. But they're some of the early there's some early settlers in Spain. And then they eventually get chased out by the Muslim dynasty that I can't remember the name of. Abyssini? Nope, that's not right. Anyway, so we have three names here, and the easiest one to look at is the last one there, amor. Interestingly, amor is Latin for love. So amor is probably the easiest one to find all the letters, but all the letters are there for all three names. So amor, here you have your A. Oh, nope, that's wrong. Clear. Here's the A.
Okay.
There's A. There's M. There's your O. And there's your R. So it's all kind of hidden. And then he's also added these additional curly cues and sort of designs coming off of it. And again, you can see in the other two names, there's a lot more sort of spirally fun diagram drawing, which I like, because this is, you're going from that Signum manus, which is very, if you're really into like nice straight lines and angles, Signum manus is your golden child. If you want to get a little wild with the doodles, this is a fun way to do it. And I've never seen one of these used in the SCA, which is very sad to me. But they're not necessarily something that the king would use. The king is going to use a slightly less name-based sign, so it's called a subscriptcy sign, and there's a little bit more going on there. I decided not to talk about them, mostly because I don't understand as much about them as I'd like to, but this is going to be used by judges, by notaries, and other functionaries, as well as some nobles and some sort of ecclesiastical, elevated ecclesiastical people. So something that I think about this being really cool is that, so I'm not royal, right? I've never reigned. I was a baroness, but baronesses aren't royalty. But if I wanted to use something that was really, and if I had I guess Spanish Visigothic persona, wanted to use something that was really specific to my persona without sort of overstepping into that, like, this is the emperor's signature, this would be kind of a fun way to do it. Plus, you'd have an opportunity to really get kind of wild and creative with your design. So you can see with Amor's, he's gone and he's made like a little hat for his name, and there's the cross on the side. You'll note the crosses appear in a number of these. Obviously, Christian religion was a big deal for these guys. If you want to look at the first one, Gudestius, he's got like a little fence thing on the bottom and maybe some plants at the beginning and curlicues all over the place. So this is a neat way to take that more structured straight lines and angles and have a little fun with it.
I love it. I like the one to me, like Amor looks kind of like a church or like a building. And then like the one in the middle looks like people walking to me.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I like the first one because it always reminds me of a little field. Like you've got little fences or something in the background.
Like a little fence. That's what I was thinking. My sister would love that one. She loves spirals. So I hope she like does this. It would be really cool.
Yeah, no, I think these are super cool. And I really I got into this website, by the way, if you're at all interested in scribal stuff from the Visigothic period in Spain, Litera Visigothica is a phenomenally cool website, and I totally recommend people checking it out. Right. Or if you're just interested in reading about exciting new things, also good.
Well, I didn't even know that this was so interesting, and now I am really interested. Thanks for showing me the rabbit hole.
You know what, this is, so I have an apprentice, Nathan, out of, well, he's moving now to the East Kingdom. And he made a joke at one point that research is the battle cry. And this has become like, this is my thing. And so my shield says research is great on it, on the like a little banner and all that kind of stuff. And it really is, but if you can be excited about having researched something and you're telling somebody else like, this is so cool, then they get excited about it too. And then you're all excited about the research together. Yeah. So research is the battle cry.
Nice.
All right, so we've talked about some non-signatory looking things. Now, I mean, they're still signatures, but they don't look like somebody signed their name. Now let's talk about actual signatures. So something I do want to note is that most of the good examples online are from the 14th and 15th century. This isn't necessarily because only people in the 14th and 15th century signed their names. It's more down to digitizing efforts, document survival rates, and just an increase in literacy. So with the rise of cities and the rise of the merchant classes, you have a rise in literacy because you cannot run a business, as it turns out, without writing stuff down. So when you start to see that increase in literacy is when you start to see more family letters surviving or families writing each other letters. A great example, we're going to look at a couple of them from the Paston family letters, which are unbelievably cool and fascinating. It's this sort of lower noble family that writes back and forward constantly to each other. And a lot of it's just like, on Saturday, I bought a bushel of peas and they were very good. But then a bunch, like the very first use of Valentine as a romantic statement towards somebody in English is used in the Paston letters. And there's some really sweet, like, mothers writing to their children or children writing to their mothers. And then there's also some really wild ones. One of them is like, my aunt would disown me if she knew I wrote this, so burn this letter before anything, which is hilarious because here it is 2021 and I can go read that letter, right? So somebody didn't follow the instructions. So let's look at some examples. I mentioned the Paston letters. This is one of the Paston letters. So this was written by a woman named Agnes Paston to her husband. And what I want you to look at here on the bottom of the screen, let me get my little thing back. Come back. Maybe, come on. Oh, no. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Technical stupidity. Okay. So down here we have Agnes. Her name is here. And then there's Paston. So Paston is the easiest one to read. You have a P, A, that's the long S, T-O-N. And then Agnes here is not spelling her name in a way that we would really recognize as Agnes. But there's an A, a D, G, and I'm assuming this is just sort of NES, where she's just like, or she might be shortening her name to Agan, which is like my dad's, that's how he signs his name, right? He just, the first two letters and he's done. Another great example, let's see here. And so this is 1440. And what's cool is we know the exact dates of these letters because they wrote them in there. They said
So
on this
what did
day.
she put before her name there?
I think it's your wife or your,
Or
this
with
is
love?
your,
Yeah. Okay.
I think that might be shortened to wife.
Interesting.
So this is Cesare Borgia. Cesare, this is his signature down here at the bottom. Cesare just writes Cesare because, of course, you know, he's a Borgia. Like, what? Who else would Cesare be? But this is a little bit more like what we would think of as a modern signature, right? Like when you think about when you look at especially a famous person's name, they've got this very like flowy signature worked out that looks fancy. This is fancy Cesare, right? Which of course he's a Borgia. He has to be that extra level of extra. But again, 1500, 1505, somewhere in there. And just a really cool example of how wild you can go with a signature. This is James Gresham. This is a little bit more sedate. So you can see James, GRE, and then you have a long H or a long S, a long sort of H, and then AM is sort of doing the bump and squiggle.
The
And then we
signature.
Yeah, classic. Like there's 4 letters in there. Just trust me. And then we have Richard II of England, bless his heart, King of England. If you ever worry that your signature looks a little sloppy, this man was a king. He was more educated, likely, than every other person that well, not every other person, but certainly incredibly well educated, right? He was raised to be a king, and he can write his name like a big boy. And so if your signature is not perfect, that is totally fine. You know, it does not need to be this, like, it doesn't need to be Cesare's signature. Cesare was never king. Richard was king. And you're cool. It's cool, right? You're using an annoying kind of pen, and it's going to be a frustrating moment. It's all right. And then this is obviously not a medieval document. This is a letter that I wrote as Baroness, me and my fellow Baroness wrote, and you can see our signatures there at the bottom. So this is just examples of 2 different ways to do it. Ours are very simple because it just, neither of us ever sat down and like came up with a cool flowy one. So you've got Kinehild and Clarelena there. And this is a really good example of what I'm hoping the next slide is. And what the next slide is going to be talking about is scripts. So this is when I mentioned at the beginning that the easy way to do it is actually the more historically accurate way to do it. I see a lot of people struggle to use like an uncial or a Gothic quadrata, which is that very rigid book text. Those aren't what you use for signatures. We don't sign our names today in Times New Roman, right? We sign using sort of, well, okay, some people, I guess there's somebody out there who probably has got it down with the serifs and everything, but you don't have to do that. Today, when we sign our names, it's usually in some sort of cursive or script type characters, and it doesn't have to look like it comes out of a book. So what you want to use is what's called a document hand. Document hands come in 2 different types. You've got chancery and charter hands. Chanceries, there's a lot of text on the screen about what these 2 things are. But what you want to understand about them is they are much less rigid and less formal than the book hands. The book hands are designed to be incredibly legible to as many people as possible. You're going to have a bunch of different priests reading out of this Bible. You want to make sure that everybody who sees it can read it. What a document hand is designed for is human writing to be as fast and hopefully legible as possible. It gets a little tricky. So you had people who worked in these chanceries who kind of learned how to read the hand, and it became pretty standardized. So you can date a Henry V charter of Henry V of England, one of his charters, to when in the chancery it was created, because the chancery hand is that, like, there's examples and you can go, okay, this one fits in this group. But it doesn't have to, it's not that strict rigid formality. It's got a lot more like tilt and lean to it. It doesn't have to follow the exact, dead bottom line. The character heights can vary. It's just like today, when we're handwriting something today, same idea. So let's look at a couple examples of what a document hand is, and that will kind of help you as you are starting to work towards your signature, what you want to look at. So these are two document hands. They do look a little complicated, but they're much, much simpler than, for example, that Gothic quadrata that we talked about. On the left, this is a Visigothic document hand. So this is an early period. This is 918. It's got its little quirks, but it's going to move much faster than if you wanted to do like one of those formal uncials that you see in the beautiful Kells manuscript. One of the things, so really quickly on the topic of uncials, one of my very favorite things is you have these huge, illuminated, beautiful early medieval Bibles that came out of England, and they've got these beautiful, or somewhere else, but they end up in England, and they've got these beautiful, rigid, formal uncial scripts that are just gorgeous. And then in between, you've got some monk or priest has written using what's called a insular minuscule, and he scribbled between the lines. So you have the Latin in this uncial, and then you have the Old English just sort of scribbled in above, because the priests couldn't all read Latin. So they had to go back in, and they were literate in Old English. Old English has this really strong document culture, but because they couldn't read the Latin, they wanted to make sure the priest still knew what he was saying, because you don't want to like accidentally perform a mass for the dead instead of a wedding, for example. So they've gone in and they've scribbled in between in this Old English. And that's actually been really useful as people went back and learned Old English and studied it, because we know what the Latin says for sure. So you can just match word to word and you're like, aha, figured it out. But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Other than so I'm going to go back a screen real quick. The name there, Kinehild, that's an insular minuscule. So that's kind of what it looks like. So on the right, this is a 14th century Veronese tax roll. And this is a chancery or charter hand again. And what is really cool about these hands is you can really start to write them like you write cursive. So you don't have to pick the pen up every time. Like you don't make these very formal cuts, lift the pen. If you look, for example, let me get my annotator back. This is a great example here. The pen never comes up, right? You just noink, 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 woo, and you're done. So it's a much faster, and because it's more fluid, it is much, much easier for people to learn, because you're not having to learn. When we learn to write, we don't ever really focus on these perfectly rigid characters, or at least most of us don't. But here you have this very fluid, it's much more naturalistic, so that when you're trying to learn to write in this style, or just learn to sign your name in this style, you're not sort of stuck in, how am I going to do this? This all, it doesn't look perfect like the book. What am I going to do? It doesn't have to look perfect. Remember Richard? Take the lesson of Richard. Just, make your name, write it. It's cool. Let's get rid of all the drawings. So what about runes? I did want to touch on these really quick, because I know a lot of folks use runes to sign their names, especially up here and in Ontario, where you have a lot of, because the weather suits it very nicely, we have quite a lot of Norse personas. So we're not going to talk super deep about this, but we are going to kind of hit on a couple of these basic suggestions. If you want to know more about how to write in runes, I teach a class on writing in runes with a linguist, which I did not give you guys the handout link, so that's not helpful. But if you Google runes with a linguist, you will probably find me. I've taught it at a couple of other classes, and I can drop a link in the chat at the end. So basic suggestions. You want to match the type of rune with your persona, or vaguely your persona, right? So Elder Futhark, if you're doing Viking, Elder Futhark has really dropped out of use by that point. So you want to use what's called Younger Futhark. If you're using a very early English persona, go wild with the Futhork. Or if you're doing Frisian, Futhork is for Frisian too. It is much better suited to writing English, just FYI, than Younger Futhark is. And there's a lot more characters. Just you know, you can go have a good time with that. The biggest thing to remember if you're going to use runes is that runes are not a letter to letter correlation. It's a sound to sound correlation. So you want to take your name, think about it, and sound it out. And that's how you're going to get to your letters, to your runes. And then consider a bind rune. You don't have to write your whole name out. You know, think about the Bluetooth logo. The Bluetooth logo is a bind rune for Harald Bluetooth because they're that kind of nerds. So that's an option. You can make a little bind rune, and then that's an even quicker way to sign your name. It looks super cool. It is going to be unique to you, and it's going to stand out from the crowd. So let's look really quickly at what I mean by sound to sound. These are, what you've got here is the rune, what we typically use for the transliteration, and then the IPA, which is International Phonetic Alphabet. So it's the IPA value. So if I wanted to write my name, Kinehild, the first thing that I would think about is what are the sounds of Kinehild? You've got a K, an I, an N, an H, O, D. So probably going to stick to just that number of characters. I don't need to like Kinehild, right? I don't need the E in the middle. I could probably honestly drop the H and just do Kinehild. It would still be understood as my name. And the poor guy carving it into a stone for me is, you know, he's going to have less to carve, right? You're going to you see a certain amount of that deletion of internal sounds. If you have a double letter in your name, so like at the end of your name, Sorokin, you wouldn't necessarily put both ends. You just put the one and you call it good. Remember, carving in stone is hard work. You want to do as little of that as possible so you can spend more time doing all the beautiful snaky things around it. So this is pulled off of the wiki page for Younger Futhark. If you have any questions about writing in runes, please don't hesitate to drop me a line. I am always here to do that because it's fun. So we've kind of hit signatures, and we're gonna talk about a couple of other small things. Before I move on, did you, Rauken, have I like stunned? Do you have any questions? Do we have any questions that came in on the?
No, but I have a question. Like, let's say someone's super excited and they're like, I want to practice this. I'm going to come up with, you know, a symbol, whatever. Where would they buy materials? Like, what kind of pen should they practice with? And
so the very best thing to buy when you're first starting out that is super cheap and super easy to find and you don't need anything special is a chisel tip highlighter. I mean, you're not going to sign your name on an official document with one of these, but it's going to create the same kind of lines. I maybe don't buy one like this where you've got you're having to get used to a weird handhold, but just ye old highlighter. I have so many highlighters, guys. Okay. It's going to get you used to using, where's my camera? Get you used to using that kind of shape. Yeah, see, it's highlighter nation around here. And how when your hand moves and when the pen moves, what happens to the shape of the letter. They're also like 99 cents, which is a lot cheaper than you're going to find a calligraphy pen for. As you get better, getting a good calligraphy pen is a great idea. There's some that are branded calligraphy. I don't really recommend those just because I find they wear out pretty quickly. But there's Paper Ink Arts is a really great website that has a whole bunch of like felt tip calligraphy pens for a good price. And if you don't live in Alaska, you don't have to pay for their shipping as much. Just I guess us in Hawaii, we suffer. It's the price we pay for living in the best places. You know, I use Sharpie. I use highlighters a lot. In terms of paper to practice on, I just practice on leftover printer paper from work. It's not, you don't, until you're comfortable with the movement and the shape of the letters that you like, especially as you're figuring out what you want it to look like, don't spend a lot of money buying fancy equipment. Just start simple. You know, this is an expensive hobby, so this can be a less expensive entree, as they say, yes, to an activity. The other idea that I would offer is, especially if you want to do like some of the more geometric shapes, just pencil and paper. Start with a pencil, draw out your design. It's erasable. Maybe don't focus so much on getting your perfect circles or whatever. If you note these two rota that we have on the screen, neither of those are perfect circles. Somebody drew those. Clearly, it's like a hand. They didn't use a stencil, and it's very, doesn't have to be perfect. That's a big thing to remember. Does not have to be perfect. It really, this is your name. This is your signature. When you look at your modern signature, I know mine's not perfect. Sometimes I don't even spell my name right. We're not going to tell people that. I guess I just told the internet, so now everybody knows. But yeah. And then once you kind of build up that confidence, you can sort of move up and up and up to better equipment. With these sort of more geometric shapes, I have a little notebook that lives in my SCA basket that's got like emergency contact information, stuff like that. And then it's got my Signum manus, so that if I'm called upon to sign a document for whatever reason, I can just whip it out and copy it. So I don't have to like memorize exactly what the shape is. Because I don't have time for that, I guess, really. I'm bad at memorizing things. So, just figure out, play with it, show it to your friends. It's like heraldry, right? You want to decide what your heraldry looks like, and same thing, you kind of decide what your signature looks like. Maybe don't do the 10-foot test, because you're going to need to write a really big signature to see if that works. But print out, type something up in one of the sort of medieval looking fonts, just a block of text, and then sign the bottom and see, do you like how your signature looks at the bottom of that page? Do you feel like that represents you the best? If it does, awesome. If it doesn't, totally cool too, but just keep tweaking and playing with it. And people are always welcome to contact me if they're like, hey, what do you think? I'm not like a master scribe or anything, but I'll give you my honest opinion.
Very cool.
Yeah, so do we want to talk about the rotas really quick? And then I think I've got like 2 more things and then I'm done. So the rotas, this is really a papal thing, but I mean, is Francis the First, Francis, is he going to come after you for using a rota? No, he's a very nice guy, I'm told. I don't know. I'm not Catholic, but these are some really, they're just neat. So here you've got Petrus and Paulus, which is St. Peter and St. Paul. So they're in the first quadrants of that little internal thing. And then you have the Pope's name split between the bottom 2 and his ordinal number, which is like Francis the First, right? And then you'll see PP, and that's for the Pope. That's his little shortened version. So where like kings will sometimes put R after their name, a Pope puts PP. And then you've got his motto around the outside, which that's kind of my favorite part of this, is if you like, mottos are a fun thing to play with in the SCA. I don't think we do it nearly enough. You'll put it sometimes on a banner maybe, or I've seen it done, like somebody put it on their apprentices or their squires' belts. They put their motto on it, which is neat, but it's just, we don't play with enough, right? We don't have enough fun with that. So come up with a cool motto. It does not have to be death before dishonor. There are other mottos in the world. Mine personally, sorry, not perfectly, it's not perfect, is Egisom med bookkrafta, which is Old English, meaning sort of frighten you with my book learning. Because
blinded you with science.
I'm sorry?
I said blinded me with science.
Yes. Yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit. She blinded me with science. Except for I'm real bad at science. I blew a little divot in my lab table. I was invited to leave chemistry class. Anyway, so this is the rota. It's kind of fun to play with. If folks are feeling particularly arty, this might be a cool way to do it. Or if you've got just a really like baller motto that you want to show off to everybody, this is going to be the way to do it. And then the last thing I had are notary marks. And this isn't really a signature moment, but this is something that I just feel like more people in the SCA should know about. These are 2 particularly complex examples, but they don't have to be this complex. So in the, actually, I think it starts with the Romans, honestly, but so we think today, like you go to a notary public. This is the same office. A notary is usually the scribe, but then they attest at the bottom that this is a true and exact copy of the document that they were asked to reproduce or asked to produce, that they attest that this was signed or noted, like that the parties named are aware of it, all that kind of stuff. Often they say which college or which church they're associated as notaries with, where they're registered. And then they have all of them, these unique doodles that is their notary mark. So we've got two examples here. There's Johannes on the left, or on my left, and Augustin on the right. I adore Augustin's little dog. It is the cutest little thing that I have, like, and you can, this is how you draw your thing every time. And you do your little dog and you have your name and all that kind of stuff. And it's, or you don't have to put a name, but it's like he's got his initials there, AH. You might include maybe a motto or something like that. Or here, I think he wrote, I alone affirm this writing, or something like this. Or I wrote my affirmation. But they can be very, very simple. So there's a lot of them that are just like little crosses. But as history went on, and as we get into these are both 15th century examples, because they kept the notaries would keep lists of everybody's mark. So you could go back and say, yes, this is legally his mark and his name, they go together. So obviously, as time goes on, they had to get more and more and more complex so that they didn't conflict with anybody previous. But you can have a lot of fun with this and just put like this little section at the bottom of a scroll. Someday I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have I'm going to do a scroll, and it's going to have the royal signatures. And then at the bottom, it's going to have my little statement saying, I, Kinehild, swear and affirm that this is really true and this really happened. And here's my little dog. I'm going to figure out how to draw that dog. I'm going to get it down. And it's going to be on his little perch, just happy as a clam. And yeah, so anyway, that's notary marks. And that is the end of my presentation. So yeah, I've run out of things to talk about. I've got my contact information there. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me via email. It's kind of a 6 of one, half a dozen of another. What's most likely to get to me first?
Your PowerPoint presentation, is that something that people can look up, or?
Yeah, let me figure out how to share it. I can probably share it to the event, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I love the Signum manus. As I say that right?
Yeah.
That is super cool. Like now when I'm doodling during interviews, I'm going to be making up a Signum manus. And
I think they're really cool.
Because I'm similar. My sister wants to know who other than Fabian has a signature that you love.
Oh, that's a really good question. And honestly, I don't know. Let me.
she's gonna go look on her walls.
I like some of the runic ones. If somebody's got their runic signature down to a way that it looks, sometimes it's like it's a little sloppy, but other times it's like nice and clean. Vera, the current queen of the West, actually has a lovely signature. She's also a scribe, so she's got some practice. I don't know. Probably those two. Alishka has a beautiful signature, but again, very talented scribe. So, it makes sense. Let's see. Oh, I think that was the only question. Yeah, and I can drop let me see, I can drop the link. Can I do this? Am I adult? No, that's not the right link. We don't need to send you guys to YouTube.
Yeah, she's saying that Liga has a great signature, and so does Marquesa Laurelin, actually. She has a really great signature too.
I don't think I know either of them, but that's not for lack of trying. That's only because
different kingdoms.
Yeah.
But I am, since my sister's watching, Kinehild has expressed interest in being interviewed, so we need to connect and set it up, because I love how passionate you are about this stuff. Like one of the things talking to people over this last year and a bit is how passionate people are about the things they do. And I've discovered that that's really what I love. I love talking to people about things they love. So I think doing an interview with you would be super, super cool.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. And you're right. Like one of the things, so we were talking about this before. One of the things that has become my absolute favorite part of this pandemic, which is a weird thing to say, but you know, you got to find your gratefulness somewhere, is Saga Saturday. So I do Saga Saturday with Maestrina Ula and Baron Bersi, and getting together with them and just being as nerdy as possible. You know, we're like throwing down these research papers that we found, and like, this is so cool. And Bersi is such a wealth of knowledge, and there is so much like enthusiasm and joy that just sort of radiates. And she is also a wealth of knowledge. I don't want to be like, Bersi's smart and Ula's really fun. But they're both incredibly intelligent people. They're both so much fun to talk to, and so much enthusiasm and joy for talking about this early medieval stuff that you're just like, so I look forward to it every
I
week.
think poise and enthusiasm are two of Ula's superpowers. Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
All right. So I think I successfully dropped the link to the Google
Yep,
Slides.
you did. Perfect.
Does that, if you click on it, does that work, or did I screw something up somewhere?
Let me try clicking on it. It works. Oh, access denied, but
okay, hang on. I believe in me. I can do this. Who has access? Restricted. I don't want to do that. This is, sorry guys, people who are still, if anybody's stuck with us through this, sorry, you're getting my like talk along right. Text. This is how I use the computer. Okay. Let's try that again.
So because we're anachronists, like my brain is like, I could do like a Signum manus with my runes.
I mean, you totally, and you could actually, so that's almost like a bind rune, right? Like once you start mushing runes together, you're moving into bind rune territory. Yeah, but I think you absolutely could.
Yeah, because sometimes I just use, like the RITH, just that, because it kind of looks like RIP, and I think it's funny. Yeah, I just totally gonna geek out on this stuff. So yeah, thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. I'm more than happy that I was able to do this, and that that it was exciting.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining us. My sister is talking to, I don't know, on Tuesday, I'm sorry, Hashaxi, but on Wednesday we are talking to Duke Gunnar Brunwolf of Antir, another lion of Antir, and that should be really interesting. And then next week I have, what is her name? Oh, of course I wrote down her real name. Laurel from the Middle is going to teach us how to make inexpensive jewelry. Cool. And I've sort of stalked her photos, and she has excellent jewelry, so that should be super fun too, because who doesn't like to be shiny? So anyway, thanks again, and my sister and I will definitely get in touch with you and set you up so that we can geek. All right. Awesome. Thanks everyone. All right. Bye-bye.